Yeah, so Mr. Little, the floor is yours. You have numerous items, including the budget that you're going to present to council.
Yeah, as everybody knows, the budget's supposed to be presented to council at the October meeting. We're going to have two public hearings, and the first one's on October the 29th, scheduled at 7 o'clock, and also the next one, the second one, November 5th, which would be during the council work session. And even if council does not have a work session due to the pandemic, I would implore council to have it that evening anyway, which I think would be more clean, and then have it during the council meeting of November the 12th.
I agree.
Okay, the 2021 budget is $36,539,253. It's an increase of about 1.2%. As I have mentioned to a couple council members, there's good news and bad news. The bad news is that most municipalities are going to be experiencing a revenue shortfall. The good news is that we can weather it, hopefully, because we have a decent fund balance that we have accumulated through the last 4 or 5 years. Through the bracket that's in the budget message, which anybody will be able to see on the on our website tomorrow, is the indication of where the shortfall will be in the business mercantile tax and also the earned income tax. The highlights of the budget are an estimated reduction of business privilege and mercantile tax about $2.8 million, and earned income tax about $250,000. There's also going to be a non-transfer of $1 million from the OPEB, and that's the same as last year. Big ticket items for the capital are going to be $663,000 for body and car cameras and mobile data terminals for the police cars, and also $200,000 for new police vehicles. One of the big items here that has, we haven't had such an increase as we have here now is the pensions. We have an increase of $972,000 approximately in pension obligations for next year, and that's because we have hired more people on the public works on MS4, and even some people we've hired 2 years ago, their obligations or their salaries are coming onto the pension, and the salaries is what drives that. Also, the other big item, we're going to be using approximately $5.9 million of our fund balance reserve. That's a projection, and that's a big one. Construction of a retaining wall at Old Ramsey Road, that's going to be $1 million, but that'll be taken out of the pollution control and flood reduction fund. That will not be taken out of the general fund. Estimated revenues and expenditures are outlined. And as everybody knows, the COVID-19 pandemic has wreaked havoc on cities and municipalities across the country, and most likely this isn't going to just continue into 21. It's going to affect 22. For our this year revenue, projecting about a 4% decrease of losing about $1 million in revenue this year. For 2021, projecting about a 9% decrease. Good municipalities that are better off across the country and even the state, they'll have about a 5.5% decrease. Really hard-hit municipalities will have maybe about a 15% decrease. And that all depends on what you have as your revenue structure, your tax structure, whether you rely more on business, whether you rely more on real estate, sales tax. We do have a business privilege tax. Most municipalities don't. That's where our biggest shortfall is going to be. I won't go through the outline of the capital expenditures. I hit on the highlights of that. Employee benefits. We have 67 retirees post-retirement health benefits that they will be receiving, and 142 active employees. As far as the revenue discussion, we'll be taking in approximately $22,480,000 in revenue, which is about 62% of the budget, and that's about a 10% decrease. Usually we're in the low 70s, about 72%. One mil tax increase usually brings in about $2.3 million. Real estate tax is not going to be affected that much, and it usually is not affected by most municipalities. It's your sales, business, and wage taxes that are going to be affected. Our Our assessment has gone up to a small degree, approximately $6 million. We're at about $2,322,550,000 on assessment. That's as of the latter part of August. Real estate tax will be taken in about $9 million, which is usual for most years. Earned income tax, as I mentioned, for next year proposed about a $250,000 decrease. We've been going through that revenue chart each month for the last 6 months, and I'll go through that after I finish the budget. And our wage tax has been holding steady, better than we thought, but there's still somewhat of a decrease. As I mentioned, mercantile and business privilege, about $2,785,000 decrease. And this is due to closures of businesses. This is due to not only the closures, but what else do we have here? Bankruptcies and anything else that's coming out of the tax office that they see on a percentage basis that we have reductions on with respect to businesses closing up or filing for bankruptcy. So that's basically we're going to be losing. On the delinquent, our tax office has done a good job of collecting delinquent and mercantile taxes over the last 4 years, but we're looking at a projected decrease of about $100,000 there. As I said, the general fund reserve is going to dip about, we're going to be using about $5.9 million in order to balance the budget. We'll still end up at the beginning of this year, 2021, we'll still have about $12 million, but we're going to be using part of that throughout 2021. We could be using more, we could be using less. We don't know. I haven't touched anything in the swimming pool money we got from the sale of the swimming pool. That $1 million is still in its own separate fund. I haven't touched anything on that as far as balancing the budget. One of the bright spots is our health benefit premiums have only gone up 0.5%. There's no increase in dental and vision. And that actually is looking because of different statuses among employees. We're actually having a decrease of about $136,000 on that. Our capital expenditures on our debt service, that's still about 10%. That's still high. That's not going to reduce until 2024. And we still have leases. We just paid off the lease last year on our last garbage truck. And the only leases we have out now are for the 2015 pumper and through the command truck, which we purchased in 2014. The capital items, as I mentioned, 4 police cars, body cameras, and the road resurfacing program, I put at $1 million. I know council has, last year, we spent close to $2 million, but I put that at $1 million because of the reduction in revenue. And again, Old Ramsey Road, that's going to cost about $1 million. We put, back in 2015 or 14, we put about $425,000 into one section, 150-foot section of Ramsey Road, and our engineers told us at that time, at some point in the future, it's going to have to be repaired, the whole thing. Well, that time has come, and we're going to have to do that next year. Also, emergency management services, that was put into the budget last year at the 11th hour, and it's going to continue this year, $185,000 for the EMS, and that's for capital items. Pollution control and flood reduction, $3.8 million projected to collect there. And we will take the last of the $500,000 that is owed to the general fund and transfer. That's part of making up the loss in our revenue for 2021. And as I mentioned, the OPEB fund is going to have a transfer from the OPEB fund because there's about a $4.3 million liability that the OPEB fund owes to the general fund because the general fund has sustained the payment of the retiree health care costs. So we're going to be having $1 million coming out of the OPEB, but we're not putting anything in from the general fund. Now, you'll notice in the budget, and last year council asked, and we've done that, Josie Rock, our finance director, has done that, there's a separate line item of a transfer from the general fund to the OPEB fund. That is not the transfer with respect to paying for retiree. That is for paying for retiree, but We usually separated that out in each individual department in years past in the budget. This year, we took it as an aggregate and we put it in so everybody can see what we're paying for retiree health care. The other transfer we just did for investment purposes. We would transfer $1 million in, and then when Marquette and Associates, our finance advisor for the OPEB fund, would say, okay, we're building up the fund because the stock market has done well over the last 3-4 years. Now it's time to pull some money out. We're not doing that. All we're doing is taking money out, in order to help balance the budget. This is for the payment of the retiree, for the retirees. We pay $1.6 million for retiree health. That's not talking about the active employees, that's retiree health. And also, as I said, we have a huge increase for pensions next year of about $972,000. The fund balance analysis is laid out, and as council can see, we're starting out at the end of last year in 2019, about $17 million, which is good. And to speak to that, council has a copy of the CAF or the audit at their desks, and we'll be setting up a meeting with the finance committee, which is made up of Mr. Wilson and Mr. Harvey and our auditor, Hozak and Speck, to go over the CAFR. And that will be on the website tomorrow also, along with the budget. And you can see the estimated revenues taken in for the last quarter of this year and expenditures. We're basically looking at about $2.4 million using this year of fund balance for 2020. And as I said, moving down to the usage of the fund balance for 2021, we're looking at about $5.9 million, which at the end of 21, projected having about $6 million in a fund balance, which is good. But we're going to be going through a lot of the fund balance, within the next 18 months, or I should say in the next 16 months. And that's in order to balance the budget. These are all projections based on different organizations, the International City Managers Association, the Brookings Institute, Tax Officers Association, on what municipalities in Pennsylvania and across the country are probably going to be losing depending on their tax structure. And also meeting with the tax office basically on what we're going to be losing from the business and mercantile tax. So that's basically the outline of the 2021 budget, unless anybody has any questions for me.
Council?
Not right now.
Yeah,
Not right
and
now.
once again, we have two
Through
public
it.
hearings coming up, and we'll be talking about this extensively. And once again, those dates, Mr. Little, for the record, they are October 29th at 7 PM and November 5th at 7 PM. Both those are,
6:30. Second one.
the second one's at 6:30.
The second one's at 6:30,
Yeah.
because we don't, it's up to you
Right.
whether you have a.
What was
work
the
session.
second date?
November 5th.
November 5th. They're both a Thursday.
Okay, but before we move on to the next item, as I normally do, I just thank all the staff, the department heads, and Josie Rock, and Tina Mueller, and Dara, and Jill, and all the department heads and everybody for putting this. We started this 2 months ago and put it together, and it's a big project, and just thanks, and I mean that sincerely, because I can't do it by myself. They help tremendously. Okay, the next